I am guessing that if we took a poll about your favorite day / favorite week as a sports fan in general, that rivalry weekend in college football would line up pretty well. And here we are. It's the culmination of a season for a lot of teams. Some teams, of course, in the Big Ten looking to advance to bowl play one way or the other. Of course, there's still a Big Ten championship game that seems to be on the surface a foregone conclusion, but no, there are many options of what two teams could wind up in Indianapolis, and we will break it all down right here on the Big Ten Live Show. Appreciate you stopping by, everyone. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. Certainly, we do appreciate your contributions as well. Cory Brada here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And we still have Cory here for the Big Ten Live Show, but he's transitioning into basketball as well. But, of course, the Hawkeyes have a big one with Nebraska, the annual showdown against the Huskers in Lincoln on Friday, and then off to bowl season for Iowa. And we will talk Big Ten. Take your calls. Steve Deace at 6:30 Eastern. And so you can line up your comments and questions there for Steve that we can pass along via the super chat. Cory, how are you?
I'm good. Did you know, and I'll give you $10 if you can tell me who it is. Do you know that there are two teams playing in a college football game right now? Two FBS teams playing football right now, and they're at halftime.
On a Tuesday afternoon. So these are MAC teams.
So I'll give you $10 so you can pick both teams.
But they're MAC teams. They have to be.
I'm not telling you. You've already.
It's Bowling Green in Western Michigan.
Wow, I got a little nervous there. You got one. It was Bowling Green. It's Bowling Green and UMass.
I wonder why they moved the game up. Maybe they've got some kind of double header.
Yeah, they have another game at 6:30. Although this game's on ESPNU, and then the game at 6:30 is that they're going to overlap. I don't know why that game was played so early.
And if one of them reaches a bowl game, we will be watching them.
Neither one are going to a bowl game. Okay. Ole Miss, I guess Bowling Green could sneak in at 5. No, they're 3-8. Never mind. They're 3-8, and UMass is 0-11.
Oh, Bowling Green usually gets to a bowl game.
Yeah, Bowling Green's been like I said last hour, pretty good program. And then later today, you do have a MAC team. See, now we're going to start thinking about bowl games, right? Very soon, we're going to have to start paying attention to these scores. But Western Michigan will be in a bowl game. They're 7-4. And they're 6-1 in the MAC. So, anyways, Broncos doing pretty good. But yeah, man, this is a great week. And I know Iowa fans, it's lost some of its zest. We talked about that last hour. But Iowa Nebraska is still a great game. You talk about Iowa State being a great game. Iowa Nebraska is a great game every single year. And everybody wants to focus on Ohio State, Michigan for good reason. But hey, Oregon Washington is going to be an interesting game. That game is in Washington. And I think Northwestern Illinois looks like a pretty good game now. I mean, there's a team that's separated by – those two teams are separated by one total game in the win-loss column, and they're both 4-4 in the league. If Illinois loses, I don't know what to say about Brett Bielema's year. I mean, I heard people raving about Luka Altmaier, how great he's been all year. And yet, this is a team with 4 losses, Mark. And maybe 5. They got to win Saturday. That might be the most important game for somebody not named Ohio State, Michigan. Obviously, Oregon wants to win for their chances in the conference and nationally. But as far as like the non-high-profile games in this league, I think you got to win that game. And kudos to Braun and Northwestern getting them bowl eligible again. And, you have a couple of duds. You have Maryland, Michigan State. You have Wisconsin. Minnesota is going to be bowling, but that's a weird, weird team. Mark, I mean, I made the comment Saturday. I made this comment to Don Patterson and his wife. We were having a conversation there in Iowa City. And I know you're not going to agree with it. But I said, I think Minnesota, like, PJ's got to start. He's going to be flirting with the hot seat here pretty soon. He's got to be. They are, Mark, they're not good. And they don't appear to be trending upward. And the thing about it is 6-5 doesn't look good, but then you look at how they got in 6-5 and it looks even worse. So I don't know what I know you're a big defender of PJ Fleck. You like PJ. But I mean, they don't have any good wins. They have that win against Nebraska, if you want to quantify that as good. It was at home. But man, giving up 38 to Northwestern, I just think that's disturbing.
So you can also frame it this way, that going into the weekend, Minnesota was 6-4, Iowa was 6-4. That's one reason you need to look at the performance on the field and the results and the opponents. And you can't just say, oh, they're 6-4, they're 6-4. It's the same team. Well, they obviously played, and there was no comparison between the two teams. And then they also, in addition to that, played two of the elite teams, each of them. And Iowa took basically Oregon down to the last play of the game and Indiana down to the last play of the game. And Minnesota got completely decimated by both Oregon and Ohio State. So I ran through the scores in my mind and I came up with something like Iowa actually outscored, if you take the Minnesota game and the two elites they played versus Minnesota's game against Iowa and the two elites they played, Iowa actually outscored those three teams by like 30 points because they beat Minnesota by 38 points and barely lost the other two games, where Minnesota scored like 19 points in those three games and gave up like 130, just got obliterated. Yeah, there's no comparison. Yeah, I would tend to agree. If you believe in the axiom that no one is ever standing still, meaning you're always either progressing or regressing, I think they're generally flatlining. But if anything, they're regressing more than progressing forward. Now, they did have a decent season last year against a very difficult Big Ten schedule, but this year has, against an easy schedule, has been pretty putrid, and they needed to beat Northwestern to really finish with, 2 weeks ago, again, I was looking at Minnesota and looking at Iowa thinking, man, these are two very different teams, but they're going to finish with the same record, because it was almost a foregone conclusion at that point. Well, Minnesota's going to beat Northwestern. Then, of course, Wisconsin's terrible. Everybody beats Wisconsin. They're going to win that game no.
They may lose to Wisconsin.
Yeah, they're only like a 1-point favorite.
It's a pick'em game. At home. Wait a minute.
Wisconsin's beaten Illinois and Washington in the last few weeks.
Mark, that game is at home. You're telling me that Wisconsin would be favored on a neutral against Minnesota? That's pathetic. If you're a Gopher fan, that is absolutely pathetic. So if they lose 6-6, man, bowl game, I don't even know the bowl game matters at that point. And I don't think he's going to be fired. I would be very surprised. Don't you at some point, don't you as an AD or president, board of regents, whoever's making those decisions, don't you have to look nationally and see how many other high-profile jobs are open? Because there's a lot of high major jobs open right now. Programs like Minnesota probably are not going to be upgrading if they were to make a move right now.
So do I believe that PJ Fleck is doing a good job at Minnesota? I believe that he has done a really good job at Minnesota. Is he currently doing one? That's more questionable. Number two, is there such a thing as a guy being the right guy for the job for a certain period of time, and then maybe 8 years later, okay, it's gone a little stale and he's still really good, he can go coach somewhere else, but maybe we need something different? That could be the case. So PJ Fleck, in my mind, is definitely good enough to be the head coach at the University of Minnesota, but is it time to do something different, to find someone else? Possibly.
We address this comment in the chat from this Buckeye fan, Buckeye Sean 007.
Sure.
Can I just ask this question? So when someone makes this comment, it's Minnesota, what are they expected to be, their ceiling? What does that mean? I mean, what does this comment mean? Are we just determining why do we write them off? Is it because they haven't been Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State in the past? They've got a very large city around them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They are not in a horrible, I mean, it's not easy to recruit Minnesota, but it's easier to recruit Minnesota than it is Iowa, I would venture to say, because you have Minneapolis proper. I don't think they have, I mean, I looked up their revenue ranking amongst Big Ten teams, and they're in the top 7 according to the metric citizen.collegeraptor.com lists them in the top 7 for most athletic revenue. I just don't know why that's the mindset. I'm not saying he should be fired. I'm by no means advocating for that, because I think, if anything, even if they lose out, I think that'd be a long shot. But then I think next year becomes really important. It's sort of how I feel about Brett Bielema.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of Brett Bielema, but it doesn't take much to turn things nowadays.
So I think it comes down to 3 things that I can think of in terms of mindset, and I fall into the same category. Minnesota has never been, and when I say any good, I mean they've never challenged for championships on a national scale since I've been watching football. The best they've ever been is, they went 11-2 like 5 years ago, 2019. But in terms of consistently for like 3 or 4 years, the best they've been is like 8-4. Glenn Mason, PJ Fleck. That's their best. So they've not done it. So I think that gets ingrained in people's mind that they just assume, well, if nobody who's ever coached there in the last 60 years can do it, then it must not be possible. Number one. Number two, the recruiting is difficult. They don't have football players in the area. They don't have enough of them. And then
they have more than Iowa. They have more than Iowa, and Iowa's had more success, for instance, in the last 10 years than Minnesota has. That's all I'm saying.
But some people would make the argument, and I can't say I'm definitive one way or the other, whether Iowa could compete nationally.
I'm not talking about competing nationally, but this question is, what do you think the ceiling is? In other words, implying that, well, they should be content with 6-6. Baloney.
Well, wait a minute. If they can go 8-4, fairly consistently under PJ Fleck, then wouldn't the next step be like competing nationally, like winning 10 or 11 games?
But they're not going 8-4 this year. That's why I'm saying it doesn't take long. Yes, and they're on the verge of potentially going. But this is what I'm saying. It does not take long for things to change. They're on the verge of potentially going 6-6, and that 6-6 is about as ugly of a 6-6 as you can possibly imagine. That's my point.
Absolutely. I also think that your average sports fan is more educated because there's so much information that's accessible. So they know one thing. They know the Big Ten makes a ton of money. So there's really no excuse for anybody, i.e., look at what Indiana's done. So Indiana...
I was going to bring that up to say, what's the ceiling? We would have said the same thing a couple of years ago. Indiana's a basketball school. Well, okay. How are they doing what they're doing right now?
Yes. Indiana, Minnesota, these schools earn the same amount of money for television revenue that Ohio State and Michigan do. They get cut the same check. Now, there are other things that kick in beyond that, of course, but yeah, there's really no excuse especially when Minnesota, the likes of Minnesota, gets a larger media revenue share than Clemson does, or Florida State, or Miami, or Alabama, even.
Yeah, and by the way, just to make a correction, I'm seeing The Athletic ranked these programs, and they've got Minnesota 11th out of 18. So I guess this is a value ranking. Again, I don't know if there's a single metric that gives us an idea. But like you said, they're all working. If you play in this league, you got to have a high standard. And I know you're competing against other teams that have the same standard or should have the same standard. But I'm simply saying, like, to your point, you compare Iowa and Minnesota. Up until this past week, they had the same record, but they look totally different.
Yeah.
And yes, there's always going to be people that are advocating for Kirk to be fired. And, they should. I've heard people in the last few days, are you going to finally start talking about Kirk's job? I'm like, what do you want me to say? Get on here and say, I'm not happy with 8-4 and they should have done that. It's like, let's be reasonable. What does the 8-4 look like? They're that close. They have not been that close in the last 5 years. Minnesota's not that close. Minnesota's nowhere close if you look at the results. Now, maybe next year they do a 180 and they're back to being steady Eddie 8-4 that competes with almost everybody, right? But we've never seen Minnesota do what they've done this year in getting their pants pulled down week after week after week.
Yeah.
And I can't understand that. So that's why I question it. But no, I don't think he's going to be fired this year.
So we'd like to make sure everyone understands what we got going here. Cory and I get together every Tuesday following our Iowa show. So join us on the Hawkeyes channel at 5 Eastern. Then we head on over here, do the Big Ten live show. We got Steve Deace showing up in about any minute now. We will get to our caller, but we got Steve Deace lined up from the Michigan podcast to join us for probably 20 or 30 minutes. And then Cory is welcome to hang out with me, but I'm going to hang out with all of you to just take us on through and check out the playoff rankings that should be unveiled sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock is typically the deal. The real MVP, I think he's just joined the chat, and he is usually good about this. He could let us know when these playoff rankings are going to be unveiled because ESPN kind of dances them around every week. But we got Minnesota Dave, a good guy to be showing up for this discussion.
Yeah, I really wanted to say a lot of stuff about this. A, it's a young team this year. And B, I'm going to say one thing about our administration, our university. Our university is torn between, do they want to be a football school that just happens to have a university or a university that just happens to have a football team? I mean, that's where we're at. And the biggest thing is we are dead last in the Big Ten for paying our coaches, our OCs, our defensive coordinators, our offensive coordinators, our coaches that are like wide receiver coaches and all those types of coaches. We are dead last in the Big Ten for doing that. And I don't understand why they do it.
Okay.
Because they should at least pay these guys at least halfway up the Big Ten. I'm not asking for like, we should be paying them the same as Michigan and Ohio State. We should at least be paying them middle of the road. Keep up with the Wisconsins and the Iowas when it comes to paying these guys.
So, Dave, I hate to interrupt here. We appreciate you calling. You're welcome to call back, but we've got our guest here. So call back, and we can continue the conversation.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
I will do that for on the playoff show then.
Appreciate it. Sounds good. All right. Let's line up Ohio State and Michigan and college football in total. We got Steve Deace stopping by from Michigan Podcast. And that's Michigan Podcast, folks. And that's every Tuesday. I believe that gets released later in the day on Tuesday, and the Bigger 10 as well, with Steve and Aaron sizing up the entire conference. And Steve has a pretty good guest typically on Tuesdays with him, from what I understand. Steve, how you doing today?
Well, brother, how you doing? Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. And I am going to do my best here to line us up in a better formation. So if it goes crazy, hey, we can still hear everyone, but I'm going to try to do something about these boxes here in just a second. But we might as well get the Ohio State Michigan part of this started. And again, I was on Michigan Podcast earlier. We delved into the nuts and bolts and the psychology of this particular game. I want to go a little bit more historic because this is kind of a tradition with Steve and I now, probably for 6 or 7 years. And we've got a historian of the game here. So Steve, also Cory Brada is here from his Iowa channel, from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Steve, so just bring us into your Michigan fandom, what that means to you in totality, what the Ohio State game has meant to you since day one.
Well, I got indoctrinated into this very early, Mark, because the game that made me a Michigan fan when I first moved to the state of Michigan, when I was in, I think the fourth or fifth grade, was the weekend before Thanksgiving, and we had lived in Florida, and I just fell in love with football in Florida. But primarily the NFL. And the first Saturday that we lived in the state of Michigan, I'm flipping channels, and the 1983 Michigan Ohio State game, for younger guys, this is going to sound weird. It wasn't on national television. Actually, it was on local access cable, and Michigan had a broadcast and Ohio had a broadcast of their own. So if you go find a streaming version of the 1983 Michigan Ohio State game, and these were two teams I think ranked in the top 10, 12 in college football. You've got Keith Byers and Mike Tomczak for Ohio State, and Steve Smith and Rick Rogers and Bo Schembechler for Michigan. And yet this wasn't on national TV. for no reason. That was just kind of how things went back then. And you'll see it was on local cable, and each state had their own local cable broadcast. And just seeing those winged helmets and under the gray November sky, and I mean, I was just instantly hooked. The fight song and everything else. So my fandom was literally birthed into was birthed by this rivalry. Now the funny thing is, though, throughout much of my early childhood, I understood the history of this because I've always loved history and I read up on it right away. But Michigan pretty much dominated a lot of these years. And for me, with being born in Iowa and having so much family in Iowa and traveling back and forth, that was the peak of the Hayden Fry era at the same time. And so for me, Michigan and Iowa was often the bigger rivalry until later on. And in particular, when Jim Tressel changed the trajectory of the game and over the last 20, 25 years in particular. And I really think now with the way the two schools have recruited, they've won the last two national championships. The offseason vitriol, from one side, Michigan cheated with Connor Stallions. The other side, Ohio State had a plant on the Michigan team to turn them in. I mean, this is the stuff of great rivalries. It's the stuff of drama, of history. And, the year I was born was 1973. And that was the year that Woody sent his team out to tear down the MGO Blue banner before #1 Ohio State played #4 Michigan in Ann Arbor, and led to almost a riot there inside the Big House. So, I think it was just providential from the beginning that this game was going to be a huge part of my life. And it got to the point that I couldn't watch it anymore, Mark, after what happened in 2019. I mean, I just was tapped out. 18 and 19 were just, physically embarrassing to watch. And then in 20, we didn't know at the time, it ended up being the greatest strategic retreat since Dunkirk. Michigan figuring out how to not play that game. If Michigan plays that game with a depleted roster, Ryan Day probably does hang 100. Jimmy gets fired. And then the next 3 years, arguably the greatest 3-year run Michigan football's had since Fritz Chrysler, Fielding Yost, never happens. And then last year's game, I think, was kind of an epilogue. The last vestiges of those teams to go down in Columbus and pull by point spread, the biggest upset in the history of the game since 1969. I think that was kind of an epilogue to that particular era of Michigan football. And now we have Sharon Moore, who's undefeated against Ohio State, but he's gonna deploy a lot of guys who have never played Ohio State before, particularly on offense. And then we have an Ohio State team that doesn't have any. I don't know, Mark, you tell me as an Ohio State historian. I know a lot of Ohio State history, but it's native to you. When was the last time Ohio State had a team go onto the field against Michigan and no one on the roster has won a Big Ten championship or beaten Michigan before? I would imagine it has been more than a few lunar cycles, brother, since that has happened. And so we've got the consensus top 2 high school quarterbacks in the nation in the last 2 classes going up against each other now as well. Probably the first of several such clashes. We're looking like it's looking like snow in the forecast again at the Big House, to give this kind of like Shakespearean kind of aura to the game. It's mystical, Mark. And, this, I think, is going to be the 50th time the two teams have played. When both are ranked, no other rivalry in college football even comes close.
It depends if you consider 1992, as it was proclaimed by Gordon Gee, the president of the Ohio State University, as the greatest win, the tie.
Yes.
Throw that aside. In 1994, of course, they stepped on the field and the Buckeyes finally broke a long drought. But that would have been the group of players that, since they lost in 88, basically without the tie, through 93 would have been the pocket of players. And obviously those groups of Ohio State teams were not achieving, 11-win seasons. Like, this is just unprecedented to be winning 11 games in a season, but keep losing to Michigan. Now, before I let Cory jump into this conversation, let me frame one other thing up, because you size this up about as well as anyone. But I'm also getting a take here that if your aesthetic gene or ability to just recognize true aesthetic quality would have been sharper and better, that you would have been in Ohio State. You saw the maize and blue, and then you saw those beautiful silver helmets and that classy look of scarlet and gray on the other side, and you gravitated to that ugly, dingy blue and yellow. Yeah, just don't understand that.
It's a deep, rich blue, Mark, and it's a robust, dripping maze with it is in fact replete with drip, as the kids say today. You bet.
Okay. Well, they say that styles make fights, and of course, we've seen that over the course of sports, in different types of sports. But you lay out the land fairly well when it comes to categorizing Ohio State in a certain way, the culture of this football program, the university, everything involved, the fan base versus what Michigan brings. And again, styles make fights. And if they're similar in certain ways, which make it fascinating, but they're so different in other ways that also, bring in that dynamic.
Well, one of the things that's been interesting about this rivalry is I think what people maybe have failed to understand is there's really only been one era where it was a true back and forth year to year. You didn't know who was going to win. And that was that was, you want to talk about, that wasn't just Shakespearean, it was Arthurian. I mean, that's this golden age of Hollywood known as the 10-Year War, right? I mean, master against pupil, father against son. I mean, after Bo's father died when he was younger, Woody basically was, he'll tell you, the closest thing to a dad that he ever had. And I mean, Bo spoke at Woody's funeral. Woody frequently visited Michigan practices. That's right, Michigan practices in the later years of his life. All the while, often giving the Friday night gold pants ceremony pep talk to the Ohio State team under his old running backs coach Earl Bruce. And then for me, on a personal level, I got to know Woody through Earl because Earl late in life coached our arena football team here in Des Moines. And that was one of the first teams I covered in sports talk radio. And in order to kind of kiss up to me and get me to like the team more, the owner, Jim Foster, after he hired Earl Bruce, he knew I was a huge Michigan fan and college football nut. So he introduced me to Earl, and Earl and I got to become actually pretty good buds later in life, early in my career. And one of the great moments I've had in my career was at the Latin King restaurant in Des Moines, Iowa, over lunch one day after a couple of martinis, and Earl Bruce just let it rip with every Woody Hayes story you could possibly imagine. None of them can I repeat in this forum, by the way. All right. And some of them I've told some of these stories to presidential candidates, senators, governors. That's how good some of these stories are. And they just don't make them like that anymore, and Bo built a team in Woody's image, literally. He was Woody's offensive coordinator before he took over as the head coach at Miami of Ohio. Michigan was running the exact same offense, the exact same defense, the exact same culture as Ohio State. And so you had that era, now known as the 10-Year War, where things did kind of go back and forth. But even within the 10-Year War, Ohio State started out strong, and then Michigan closed strong. In fact, in Woody's last 3 games against Michigan, he'd failed to score an offensive touchdown in any of those games. Barring that era, for the most part, it's actually been wild swings where one team has controlled the game. And there have been inflection point games where momentum has changed. I would say the last 3 such games were 2021, when Michigan finally broke the seal under Jimmy. I would say 2001, when that was when Tressel made the guarantee that we all laughed at the time, and then went up to Ann Arbor with a Michigan team that just needed to win and was in the Big Ten, or in the Rose Bowl, and was the Big Ten champion, and pulled out that game with a 7-win Ohio State team, and that kind of set the stage. The next year, Ohio State wins the national championship, and that kind of was the baton pass from Lloyd Carr dominating John Cooper to Jim Tressel. And then 1969, well, when the Michigan program was as down as it has been, we have seen ever, until the Rich Rod Hoke era, and Bo upset what he would later say was his greatest team that year. The 1969 team, defending national champions. They brought everybody back because they were a largely sophomore-driven team in 1968. And they won every game by at least 27 points. ABC actually sent their B network team to do that game that year because they thought there was no chance Michigan was going to win, and then ended up being called, quote, the upset of the decade. So there's typically been inflection point. Woody's hiring was probably the next inflection point before 69, where Michigan went from a period of dominance now to Ohio State becoming a national power again. And so the all-time record between these schools is very close. But it's because one team wins 5 or 6 in a row, the other one gets desperate, makes a key coaching change, and it swings back. Or in the case of Ohio State, 20 games in a row, whatever. Well, I don't count 2011. No, with all due respect to Shoelace and all the guys in that team, we beat an interim coach that year. It's almost more insulting to me that that's our only win. Like, I almost would have felt better we'd have lost that too. Like, I feel ashamed claiming that as a W. You know,
does that influence partly, Steve, because of Fickle, what he's doing now?
Some of it, but also just the interim tag, right? You know, so but it's historically been a rivalry of swings. It's not been a rivalry of back and forth year to year. These two teams at the top at the same time. They've been at the top at the same time a lot, but often one team's kind of had the other team's number. We haven't really seen a lot of back and forth year to year in the history of the rivalry.
I don't have a ton to offer this conversation, as I told you prior, Mark, but just the ins and outs of this matchup. But I do want to ask you both a general question about the playoff and positioning. And this may fall on deaf ears to a lot of Ohio State and Michigan fans, because I'm still learning. I mean, I got friends that just moved back to Columbus that were here, that grew up in Cleveland, and I kind of learned about the Ohio State Michigan rivalry from them, because it's totally, Steve, you've been in Iowa a long time. You understand where I'm coming from as a guy who grew up with Iowa State as being the rivalry, and it doesn't mean anything close to what Ohio State Michigan means. None of Iowa's 4 rival trophy games mean anything close to what this game means. So I'm still trying to process the idea that a regular season game could potentially mean as much as a national championship could. But I mean, there are people that would argue that. So I want to ask you about playoff positioning, even if it does fall on deaf ears. What would have to happen if all chaos broke loose during rivalry week? You have Vanderbilt losing to Tennessee. If you had BYU losing to Central Florida, Alabama loses to Auburn. If Michigan plays Ohio State close, does the name brand and 9-3 without really any great wins, does that get them? Can they move up enough? Is there enough room for growth with a loss?
I don't think so. I think with the schedule we're playing next year, yes. I mean, next year's schedule is yowza. Okay, but with the schedule we played this year, no. In fact, I think there's a higher likelihood at 10-2 with an Ohio State win, Michigan doesn't get in. And I don't know what those odds are. I'd probably guess 20, 30%. But I think that's way higher than Michigan with a close loss, given the overall resume. Listen, in most years, Michigan playing Oklahoma, Nebraska, Michigan State, USC, and Ohio State would be like yowza of a schedule. But, several of those teams didn't amount to much. So they kind of just look like, doorstops, traffic cones on the way to the game. So I would say no. This is 1 year, and we always have the hand-wringing, as you well know, of, well, these teams, what do they all win? And they never all win, right? Well, we're down to 1 weekend left, and there's a lot of teams poised to finish that with brand names or nice records and resumes, or great stories like Vanderbilt that are poised to finish with 10 wins, who are not playing each other here in this last weekend. So this is the closest to kind of a nuclear, scenario for the committee that we have seen in the playoff era, where how are you going to parse these various teams? I mean, I think there's a scenario where Michigan wins, Washington beats Oregon, and Michigan goes to the Big Ten championship game and just gets outclassed by Indiana and is sitting there with 3 losses, and they're the runner-up team in the Big Ten and don't get picked for the playoff.
I mean, to each his own opinion on that. I cannot imagine a 10-win Michigan team. Maybe I'm reading way too far into branding, but a 10-win Michigan team with a win over Ohio State not getting in the playoff? I
don't think the odds are great, brother, but I don't think they're 0. I mean, what happens if BYU is 11-1 and plays number 5 Texas Tech onto the last play? What happens if Vandy goes and beats Tennessee and they're 10-2? Their overall resume, other than the Ohio State game, would probably be stronger than Michigan's. What if Ole Miss is 11-1, but Lane Kiffin leaves for LSU, but they're 11-1? I mean, I think there's a lot of intrigue still to come, for sure. But the first thing Michigan has to do is win this game in order to get into that conversation. And there were several games this year I didn't think they were going to put themselves in position to be in position. It has been one of the weirdest years of Michigan football I can ever remember. This is the testing of depth. I mean, I still don't know how good of a game day coach Sharon Moore is, but in terms of recruiting and roster construction, he had to really rebuild the last 2 years on the fly. We lost so much after Jimmy left. And then Jimmy's recruiting the last 2 years by our standards was not very good. He was slow to embrace NIL, was really hesitant about paying guys and what that did to the locker room. And then Ward Manuel is a notorious tightwad and wasn't eager to pay guys anyway. So our 2 recruiting classes before he left were very substandard by our standards. And that's why we're playing 7 freshmen right now on offense, 7. And so I mentioned this to Mark last week. There was no other team in America that had the delta between yards per play on offense. We were 20th. That's awesome. I mean, that's excellent. 20th in the nation in yards per play, 65th in scoring, right? And so how do you explain that delta? Turnovers, mistakes, penalties, missed assignments, breakdowns, inconsistency. And you get that when you're very talented, but 7 of the guys of your 11 on offense are freshmen, and we have 3 different offensive line starters than you started the season with. And so there's been a lot of chemistry issues, a lot of consistency issues. And so it was a fight for Michigan to even get here to 9-2 to be in position. And that's the problem we have is what's that second really good win? What is that? The closest would be Washington. I think if Washington beats Oregon, they'll definitely be ranked. They might even be ranked tonight at 8-3. I'd rank Wake Forest instead if it was me, but they might be ranked tonight when the playoff rankings come out. We don't know. And then maybe that lends more credence, but I don't think there's great odds Michigan will be left out, but I don't think it's automatic either. I'd say if Michigan wins, and then how does Michigan win? Like, does Michigan knock Julian Sayin out? Does he get his bell rung? Is he held out of concussion protocol in the first quarter? And then the next 3 quarters, you're playing a backup? Right, that may give a subjective committee rationales for moving some pieces around later if they have to.
So when you talk about this Michigan team being a strange season, more so than what you've seen in the past, that leads me to believe that you're surprised by certain things. So what has surprised you about this Michigan team? And then I'll add on the Bryce Underwood evaluation of you had to have some level of expectations of what is the season going to look like in terms of him statistically, how he handles situations, handles himself, shows progression from week to week. How have those 2 things progressed through the season?
I think the number one surprise has been special teams. This is the worst special teams unit in Michigan I've ever seen. And I have watched live every football game this university's played in the last 42 years. And then I've gone back and watched the broadcast and film of every existing game this program has played since like 1964. I've never seen a special teams unit this bad. Put it this way, Andrew Marsh, I think, had a 14-yard punt return in his first game as punt returner against Maryland last week. That instantly made him Michigan's leading punt returner for the season. Dominic Zabata was an All-American last year, like an alien. He almost went pro early. Mark knows he played a pivotal role in the Ohio State game last year. He's got the yips bad. I mean, he's 12 for 20 this year, and most of his misses are like inside 40 yards. He's got the yips. And then the punting. They thought they had a transfer portal punter. Something happened. Nobody really knows. And then he didn't show up for fall camp. And so, this Hudson Holland back, one kick will be 48 yards. The next one will be net 14 yards. It's just been, special teams have been a mess. And for the way we play, and Mark, your co-host will get this, we play a very Iowa style of football, just with better recruiting classes. It's very complementary football based. Special teams, field position matters greatly in how Michigan plays. That's part of our ethos, the DNA of our program. And so the amount of hidden yardage, Samaj Morgan for the first 10 games of this year, if he wasn't fumbling the punts, he was the worst punt returner in any power conference team. So that hidden yardage, when you've got such a young offense and a rookie OC, that's a huge factor. And yet I think the offense is actually underrated and the defense is overrated. I thought the defensive line would be maybe as good as it was last year. No Grant or Mason, but 3 deep at every position. But it's been good. I think it's probably a top 10 defensive line, maybe 15, but it was supposed to be better. I think the secondary's good-ish. but there is no one corner there that you can just say, all right, hey, Will Johnson, you go get Marvin Harrison. And as long as we go 50-50, we're winning the game like we did a couple of years ago. All right. And Marvin beat him on a couple plays and Will beat him on a couple plays. And that was enough. We got a stalemate and we could then win the game at the line of scrimmage. We don't have that kind of corner this year. Offensively, this is the first time. I mean, Michigan almost came into the game with a 100-yard rusher in every game leading up to it for the first time. I mean, we're going to go back to the Tamunga, Biaka, Batuga, Tyrone Wheatley, Ed Davis era. Mark, you'd remember that. That's one of the best three, triumvirates at running back Michigan's ever had. We're one game off. We were very close. I think Justice Haynes got like 89 yards against USC before he got hurt. Otherwise, we would have pulled this off in every game. And they've been with three different tailbacks and multiple different offensive line combinations. And this offensive line is really coming along, particularly in run blocking. They are moving people. And the three best players in this line are redshirt freshmen. So with another year of strength and conditioning, that will be absolutely a Joe Moore candidate offensive line a year from now. Pass blocking, they've gone from shaky to adequate to getting there now. Right. And then some of that is the young quarterback, too, and how much he holds onto the ball and forces them to protect longer. So I think the offense, if people just look at the counting stats, you got to look at the advanced stats and you'll see in the advanced stats. I mean, Michigan's had five games this year where they had 400 yards or more and couldn't get to 30 points. Right. So you've heard of regression to the mean. There's progression to the mean, too. So you keep doing what Michigan was doing week in and week out. Sooner or later, you'll play a clean game and kind of break out. And that's what happened against Maryland last week. So I think the counting stats have overrated the defense and made it look like it's kind of a top 5 or 8 defense, probably more of a top 15, 20 defense. And I think the counting stats have made it look like offensively, they've not taken a huge step when they have taken a huge step if you look at some of the more advanced metrics.
Steve Deace, Michigan podcast in the Bigger Ten. Steve, how much more time do you have? Because we want to get to a few other things.
Oh, let me see here. Oh, I've got a good 15 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. I'll get to the Big Ten. Would like Cory to chime in concerning Iowa to get your takes about the program and anything he would like to ask you there. But concerning the Big Ten, we know that obviously you have honed a system during the offseason to do your best to project where everyone's headed in college football based on their talent, based on their experience, based on their coaching staff. What surprised you most about this season in the Big Ten?
If anything, I think we have underrated how good of a head coach Curt Cignetti is. And I think this is the greatest barnstorming of the Big Ten by a woebegone program since Hayden Fry basically broke the Big 2 Little 8 in the early 80s. But that first year that Hayden won the Big Ten, they were like 8-3, and it was a multi-year, multi-team tie in 81. That 85 team,
Rose Bowl. Yeah.
Yes. And that 85 team that was number 1 for 5 weeks is freaking loaded with players. I mean, one of the best players on that team, Larry Station, was a consensus All-American, didn't really play much in the NFL, but you had Ronnie Harmon, who played over a decade in the NFL. You had the Heisman Trophy runner-up there, and Chuck Long, several offensive and defensive linemen that played years in the NFL. This Indiana team does not have that. Maybe in a weak quarterback year, Mendoza's kind of played his way into being the top quarterback in the draft. But I think the last few years, neither he nor Ty Simpson would be like number 1, quarterback overall. I think it's more of a supply and demand issue. The running backs are, okay. I mean, it's just the way that they play. It reminds me a lot of what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State. It's just this guy did it overnight, where it took Bill Snyder like 10 years to do. And they play with a ruthless level of efficiency, is how I would describe how Indiana plays. It's just ruthless and it's efficient, and it's a team loaded. It's also, I guess I would say what Cignetti has done is married Gonzaga basketball with Kansas State football. I mean, it's similar to what Snyder did with K-State football, but with a Gonzaga basketball approach, which is a lot of transfers. You stay old. And a lot of guys who are talented, but often not as talented as the top teams in their league, but they're older. They're grown men. They've figured life out a little bit. They're responsible. They know what the routine is. They've had a couple of extra years of physical development to kind of, bridge the gap of natural ability against younger teams. And I think if anything, we've underrated how good of a coach that he is. And then in the rest of the league, guys, is kind of gone the way that it would go. I mean, Michigan has the exact record with the exact losses at USC and at Oklahoma. I thought they would have in the preseason. I thought Ohio State with the young quarterback would end up, somebody would get them at some point a trip up game. That has not happened. But overall, other than Indiana, which I thought would probably be about an 8-win team this year, much of the league has gone the way that I thought it was going to go in the preseason.
There's no way you expected PJ and his team to be so flat in so many games, though. I mean, like they're on the verge of maybe going 7-5, but as we talked last hour, Mark, you and I talked about this, that those 5 losses, I mean, it's not, there's no shame in getting blown out by Ohio State.
Right.
But just getting thudded week after week after week, obviously the game at Iowa is one that stands out to me. And then to me, I have a lot of respect for Brett Bielema. In fact, I've tossed his name out there as a guy that I wouldn't mind as a potential candidate when Kirk decides to hang it up. But that Illinois team has been a disappointment. It's a team that had a favorable schedule.
I agree. Illinois has been a disappointment from a preseason expectation standpoint. From a power rating standpoint, they're about what many of us rated them in the preseason. I think a lot of what they did last year was schedule specific. And then, the win over that win over South Carolina in the Citrus Bowl, I think gave them a lot more credence than almost anything they did in the regular season. And I think what Illinois is the kind of team that, and Illinois speaks to, again, why I think Cignetti is even a better coach than we think, because he's taking an Illinois kind of roster, older guys that aren't as talented, but older, experienced, and making and playing with that level of ruthless efficiency to just go to Oregon and take on, the NIL All-Star team and spank them in their own backyard there. But if you look at their overall roster, that's the kind of team pre-NIL that you would have picked absolutely as a national championship team that brings everybody back. I think what the NIL era is teaching us now is that returning production and all those metrics, we went from returning starters doesn't matter anymore because teams play so many sub packages and everything else that you have to do returning production. And credit to Bill Connolly at SB Nation. He was kind of on the cutting edge of that. Now others have caught up. But I think now we're at the point we're also learning, and take it from a guy that does a lot of numbers and a lot of power ratings and reads a lot of this. All right. I'm telling you right now, a lot of your power rating, just numbers, handicappers are losing, have lost the last 2 years overall in the NIL era. And I follow a lot of these guys. Why? Because those numbers don't mean what they used to mean. When the top, Bud Elliott at 24/7 Sports pointed out that there's more teams in his blue chip ratio right now than ever before. There's 17 teams in college football who have the last 4 classes of recruits, or at least 50% of them are blue chips. But he said, so there's more teams at that top than ever before. But then he said, the next tier, the gap between that top and that tier has never been greater. And that, like the number one blue chip ratio team in the Big 12 is TCU. 21% of its recruits, 21% the last 4 years have been 4 stars or better. And so just the level of talent being accumulated by these top tier schools now, and just rating these other programs like they're minor league franchises, or relegation in soccer. And I think that takes a program like in Illinois and makes their returning starters and production numbers that would have mattered a lot even 5 years ago. I don't think they matter as much anymore.
Cory, was there anything on the Iowa front?
Mark really wants me to give you some Iowa questions.
Absolutely, I do.
I mean, I guess my main question, I was in Iowa City for this Iowa-Michigan State game this past weekend, and I don't know what the future for Jonathan Smith is. It was a weird game. I guess my biggest question that we haven't addressed on this show, Mark, is why are teams still kicking to Caden Weegan? I mean, I'm serious. I don't. It makes zero sense. And Michigan State did this little pooch punt from the quarterback about a half a dozen times, and it was smart football. But the 3 times they decided, we're just going to kick to them.
Yep, that lost the game
every time.
Yep.
And it was interesting post game with Don, and I've never gotten Coach Patterson to even. He's at least entertained the possibility, but after Saturday, and of course, Caden broke the all-time record for most return touchdowns in Iowa history. I just asked Don, I said, you got to at least have him in the conversation with Timmy Dwight.
With Tim Dwight, yeah.
I mean, he's got to be. And Steve, you watched Tim Dwight play.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't, and I didn't watch him live, right? But we know the stats. We see the tape. I don't know how you can be any better than what Caden Weegan has been. So for Iowa fans that haven't seen, that didn't live back during the Timmy Dwight era, just kind of give us a comparison since you watched that Hayden Fry era as well.
Well, I mean, straight ahead speed. I don't know that I've ever seen a faster white guy than Tim Dwight, at least not on a football field, in terms of just burst and from point of entry of the ball to initial burst. I mean, that was just, superhero stuff. I mean, we saw it in a Super Bowl, for example. I mean, he was the old car, ads, does 0 to 60 and, so many, minimal seconds. And that was Tim Dwight. I would say the young man we're talking about now has more escapability and maneuverability than Tim had. Now, you could argue that Tim was so damn fast, he didn't have to do that. All right. And that, it's funny if you go back to that 97 team, his senior year, that had him and Tavian Banks both on that team. And those were both guys that were daylight guys, that if there was daylight, they were gone. And with instant acceleration. And that's why Tim was able to defy a lot of demographics and make so much money in the National Football League. When you look at Dwight and then all the guys in Cooper DeJean and now and now what we saw on Saturday, I mean, if I'm an opposing coach and I see a white guy back there to return a punt for Iowa, I'm just putting it out of bounds. I'm just going to assume the guy is a freaking, is a future decathlete, CrossFit all-star. He's going to be on reality TV when his 40s winning the CrossFit, games. And I'm just kicking the damn thing out of bounds and telling Iowa, you know what, I'll give you 10 yards of hidden yardage. So now instead of driving 70 yards, you got to drive 60 yards. But I'm going to make you do that 4 or 5 times rather than let you have punt returns 4 or 5 times that set you up into my, side of the field every single freaking time. I don't understand it at all.
Riley Moss was not a great punt returner, but he
was also a fast white guy. Yes,
he was a phenomenally fast white guy. Yeah,
yeah. I will say this: I think that also though speaks to kind of the more meta thing with Iowa football. And it's been several years since I've had a meaningful conversation with Kirk, but I used to know him very well in my previous professional life, and loved him to death. And I would think, and it's precisely because he's a dinosaur, and it's precisely because in some degree the game has passed him by, but in all the right ways. Meaning the game has not passed Kirk by in the way that it has other coaches who schematically cannot keep up. The game has kind of passed Kirk by in the kinds of ways that make us question the future of the game, if what I'm saying makes sense. And I do think when you're at Iowa, and maybe you've heard me say this before, talking Iowa and Iowa State or programs like that, you need a niche. You need an outlier. What makes you different? The dumbest thing Wisconsin did, and I said this to Mark when Fickle came in and went to that air raid offense, Mark, you'll remember I told you that very first spring, it reminded me of watching Rich Rod out there trying to run the zone read with Stephen Threet, Nick Sheridan at Michigan. Why would you abandon 30 years of what has been successful? Keep doing it, right? And the Wisconsin program in our lifetimes may never recover from that. I mean, they're on their 3rd roster alteration in the 4 years under Fickle now. What Iowa has is an outlier. It's an old style college program with college program values and a coach from that era. And because of the way the game has moved past Kirk, schematically, they still do things. Phil Parker is still out there befuddling quarterbacks and offensive coordinators every single week. All right. So it's not that schematically the game has passed Iowa by. It's that systemically it has in all the ways that we think the game is existentially threatened. And so that throwback look, it's like, hey, I was just at Wrigley 2 weeks ago for Michigan, a very old stadium, but it doesn't look outdated. It's old, but it's vintage. It's old in all the right ways. I went to the Rose Bowl 2 years ago, same thing. It's old, but in all the right ways. Okay. And I would say the same thing about Iowa. And if there's a cautionary tale to look at Wisconsin and look at Nebraska, we got to get the next guy, the guy that can take us to the next level. And maybe a lack of some self-awareness there. I would let Kirk coach there. I mean, if Kirk puts in his will, that he wants to go full Joe Diffie, prop me up beside the jukebox when I die, drag him out there, man, cadaver and all right, and make him the coach. I'd hold on to that. There's a formula there, man, and I would hold on to it as long as I possibly could. And they know they've got to upgrade the quarterback. They thought they did it this year. I mean, no one in their right mind would have predicted Mark Gronowski would have so many such difficulty completing a downfield pass for an entire year, given his resume at the FCS level. So they know they need to upgrade there, and there's options to do that, and that's where you can maybe spend your NIL money. But I would actually urge Iowa, for as long as possible, do not quote unquote modernize. You have a niche, you have an outlier that makes you different, that makes teams have to prepare for you differently. And I think as long as you can have that, you have a chance to be successful.
So off of that breakdown of Kirk, as you look across college football, not just the Big Ten, is there a coach that you can think of that you think is grossly undervalued? Maybe we lost Steve.
I think somebody's calling him, Mark.
Okay. That's right.
Maybe.
All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. We'll take comments and questions. And
I just want to say real quick to respond to his comment. I mean, if Kirk's starting next year wins 4 or 5 games a year, you're not holding. I think he's talking about if they continue to win 7 or 8 games, because he brought up parallels with Nebraska, with Wisconsin. That's what those teams were doing under Pelini, under Christ. They were winning 7, 8 games a year, and that's what Kirk is doing, or more than that. In Pelini's case, 9 games. Yeah, Christ had So, what's ironic, just on the real quick on piggyback on the Caden Weegan thing, I made the comment after the game on Saturday, like, who would have thought that Iowa could have potentially gotten a better return guy after Cooper DeJean left? But he is better. Like, Weegan is better in every sense of the word. As great as Cooper DeJean was, Caden Weegan is a better return guy. So now the rest of special teams for Iowa is a different story. So we won't get into that. It's been a struggle. Kicking has been fine, but they've been down at punter. They've been down with snapper. They've been down basically every other special team spot on the field. So they've kind of been odd in that. We've been so electric in one area, but we got Steve back. So I don't even know what we were talking about, Mark.
Well, Steve, I was just curious, off of that analysis of Kirk, whether there was a coach out there anywhere in the country that seems like an outlier to you in regards to your evaluation of him either being, everybody's missing it on this guy. He, under the right circumstances, would be really good and is underappreciated, or this guy's really not good. He's just in the perfect place and is being propped up.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to stay in the state of Iowa. I think people way underrate how great of a coach Matt Campbell is. And that is a program I know very well. I covered it professionally and closely. I used to own the Fan magazine. The athletic director there and I have been friends for going on 20 years since he arrived. So I'm very familiar with that program. And historically, it's a doormat. I mean, historically, it is Vanderbilt. It has not won a conference. It now has the longest title drought in the Power Four. It has not won a conference championship since the year the Titanic sunk in 1912. And for Matt Campbell to have gotten them to 2 different Big 12 championship games, I mean, he's won 4 or 5 Big 12 conference coaches of the year. And the thing is, I think there is this notion that he's able to do this at Iowa State. But the reason why I am quite confident that Matt would be successful at a bigger level program is because the number one thing that they do well is identify talent before other schools do. I mean, I'll just tell you from a Michigan perspective, I cannot tell you how many guys we offer early in the process that Iowa State has already offered. And this has gone on for much of the Campbell era. They do a phenomenal job of scouting. And so here's what that tells me. If they're able to get ahead of the bigger schools for a level of recruit that they then lose out on, okay, then there's a trickle down effect. That means they're also then, when they lose that kid to one of the bigger schools, they're ahead of then the schools at their level in identifying who that next level of prospect is. I mean, the amount of guys playing on NFL, were there 17 guys on NFL rosters right now from Iowa State? That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy, which also tells you then that he is developing young men in a pro system. There's a reason why he's been coveted. I mean, my Lions went after him when they hired Dan Campbell. The Bears looked at him a few years ago. So and then being younger and the ability to relate. Now, I think that Matt would thrive at virtually any big program. I know he loves Iowa State. I think if he eventually goes to a bigger program, I don't see it being a place, with a lot of glitz and glamour. I don't think that's who he is. I think it'll be a place where that stuff is not expected of him, where there's not a ton of, very public booster interference. And that's why he's been very, very selective over the last few years. But he's going to bring back almost his entire team at Iowa State next year. So if they can keep him for one more year, I mean, they might be Big 12 favorites next year.
So if you were running the show at Penn State,
That's a perfect fit for Matt Campbell from a big school standpoint. It's an out of the way school. The boosters are more in control now everywhere because they're paying for labor than ever before, right? If you're paying for the labor of an organization, you are in charge. I don't care whose name is on the nameplate. If you're writing the check, if you're responsible for the labor overhead of an organization, you're running the show. So boosters are running the show everywhere. But relative to how that works everywhere else in America, in the Big Ten, because of still the the academic reputation, it's still not as intense there as it is around the country. So you go to Happy Valley, kind of an out of the way place. You can raise a family there quietly. He still has young kids, so I would think that is a perfect fit for him. They may not want to look at him though, because maybe they say, well, we've got to score more points, and that's been kind of a pedestrian offense, which is also not true. There have been plenty of years they've averaged well over 30 points per game. But then the last few years under John Heacock, the defense has been very good. So they played more of a complementary style of football because they didn't have to outscore teams to win every week. But that's the kind of bigger name program where I think, he would feel like it's a bigger brand, but I could still kind of be, homespun Midwest guy.
Mark, I got a slide, but I just want to throw, because Steve brought up white cornerbacks, and I wouldn't normally do this, but this is a Big Ten show. Can we plug our live show on Wednesday? You mind
Absolutely,
if I throw a quick plug in there? So we've got a live show coming up Wednesday in Omaha, and we'll have Adam Shada. You remember Adam Shada?
Oh, yeah.
Steve?
You bet.
Early 2000s. So he'll be joining me live at Big Grove Brewery over in Omaha, 5 p.m. tomorrow. So what do you know? Another white cornerback. So, anyways, Steve, always a pleasure to see your face and to hear your takes. So
thank you, man.
Best of wishes this Saturday.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Steve Deace, Michigan podcast, The Bigger Ten. You can find them both obviously right here on YouTube, and The Bigger Ten on the Michigan podcast channel. Has the prediction for the game been released? Your prediction. I don't know if you can you still hear me, Steve? Something must have changed. I think we lost you. Steve, can you hear me? No? I guess.
Are we good?
Oh,
all right, man. I'll see you.
Okay. Steve. All right. Great stuff from Steve Deace, Michigan podcast. And we're going to keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. So you're stuck with me, but we are awaiting the latest edition of the college football playoff rankings. And I got to tell you, I don't know when those are going to be released. I will tell you that my picks are available on Patreon. So you can either sign up for the monthly membership or you can get them per week. You got Cory Brada's predictions, Steve Deace. So ironically, both Cory's predictions and Steve's 12-pack predictions are available on Patreon, along with Matt Zemek, our USC host, and Steve Merrill from Wager Talk, his under the radar selection. So you can catch me on patreon.com, MarkRogersTV. That's the old name for the whole network there. MarkRogersTV on Patreon. You get my predictions. 220 and 59 money line. It's not bad. All right. Yes, I have slipped on the against the spread. That's still about 55%. You'd slide some change into your pocket there. All right. We will take comments and questions. I will leave the call-in line also here. Meanwhile, I'm going to look up the time in which we expect the playoff rankings to be revealed. But again, I'm going to leave the call-in line here, and we're going to run through this week's schedule and the rankings. So the call-in line is in the chat. Amazon link in the description of the video. Every video here at the Voice of College Football, not just on the main channel, but also on all the team channels. You can grab the Amazon link. And what that does, folks, is it does absolutely nothing to your shopping experience. It is completely transparent to your shopping experience. What it does for us at the Voice of College Football is it takes about 3 or 4% of what you are sending Amazon, and it sends us that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5%, depending on the item, from Amazon. Doesn't cost you a penny. Does not cost you a penny. So please contribute to the Voice of College Football. It's the one way that you can do it without spending a dime, by using the Amazon link. It's in the description section of the video. And again, I'm going to track down the timing of the playoff reveal. I don't see much change here. We talked about it last night in particular. Oregon could possibly get a bump over Ole Miss, but they pretty much delivered an expected win against USC. It wasn't super dominant, but it was a convincing win, a strong win, decided win at home by 2 scores. So you would expect them to stay put, 1 spot behind Ole Miss. Other than that, what do they do with USC? Does it really matter? No, USC's out of it. USC's resume doesn't really impact too much, other than obviously good win for Oregon, and it's a loss for Michigan. But where USC's placed, you could just say, well, they should lose to Oregon, so let's not move them, or they're going to take a hit. There's some teams down at the bottom of the rankings, Illinois in particular, and also Missouri lost, and somebody else lost near the bottom of the rankings, that will probably get the heave-ho in favor of some group of 5 teams in the final 3 or 4 spots there. All right. Anything else I need to pass along to all of you? We've got our Ohio State show coming up 11 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. You're going to see me for Ohio State Live, the Florida State show live. Let me get these in order. Ohio State at 11 a.m. Eastern time, Miami at 7, Florida State at 8. Then we're back here at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Leanne Herring's going to stop by to talk Houston, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, recruiting, all sorts of good stuff. We were in the midst of a conversation with our buddy Minnesota Dave, so we'll continue that. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
It's Axa Soda time. It's mini Axa Soda time.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, to go back to what we were talking about, like I said, the university, I feel they want to be like Cal academically, but they're not really pushing anything to do. They're kind of like in nose man's land when it comes to athletics. And Coyle, our athletic director, Matt Coyle, I just feel like he has his hands tied because the university only wants to pay assistants so much money. And like I said, it's in the bottom of the Big Ten. That's a joke.
Well, somebody's got to be at the bottom.
Yeah, well,
when you think of it that way, they're all making the same amount of money from media rights, but somebody's got to be at the bottom. Yes, you don't want your school to be at the bottom. You want them to be showing that they want to not just hoard from the Big Ten and say, you know what, we're going to benefit from being in the Big Ten and make all this media money, and we can build some nice buildings with this. But yeah, that they're going to reinvest obviously in their program to try to win football games.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. It's just you can't just keep on extending PJ's contract and still can't not pay his athletic coordinators and his coaches on the bottom of the Big Ten. You're just going to get that type of results then, where you just get right in that middle of the road all the dang time. And this is a team, Mark. This is a team. I think I said it before. This of all of the teams that are going to a bowl game, with the exception of the team that went in because to the Detroit Bowl because of academics.
Yeah.
for the team for this team to, this is probably the worst team to go to a Gopher team to go to a bowl game under
Yeah.
PJ Fleck
Yeah.
that qualified for a bowl game, actually
Yep.
qualified for a bowl game.
Yeah. Agreed.
So, this team just, it's like I said, it's young, but there's no signs of improvement. They take two steps forward and they take 4 steps backwards. Their defense looked awful against Northwestern. They
Yeah.
couldn't. Normally they get 3 or 4 sacks a game. They got 1 sack. 1 sack.
Yeah, this could have been a very weak 8-4, but it could have looked good, like 8-4, 15-point lead against Northwestern. And thinking about, Wisconsin, one of the worst teams in the league next week. We should win that one. And then lo and behold, an hour later, you're losing to Northwestern, blowing a 15-point lead. And voila, Wisconsin's good enough to beat Illinois by 17.
Yeah, Wisconsin. You have to remember, Northwestern also took a 14-point lead. We came back,
Sure.
scored 28 unanswered, and then they scored 21 unanswered. What's going on here? That's the problem I have. I don't know what to do about it. I really don't. You can throw in so much NIL money, but if your university just wants to hand tie you with the, like I said, the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and the other coaches, blah blah blah, it gets annoying for me.
Well, what you're speaking to also, Dave, is those NIL potential candidates that are going to really kick in, those boosters. They want to give to the university and give to the football program, obviously, but they also want to know, how is this going to be used? And if they have the same numbers that you do, which of course they do their research, they do their homework, they're going to say, what's our incentive to give you extra money if you're not spending the money that you already have to make this team better? Why should it all come back to us?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, Mark. I really don't. It just, like I said, we're in a big city. We should be able to do what we can do. We have a bunch of Fortune 500 companies around the area. You think that we would be able to get some people to donate to the university and the athletic facilities a lot better than they have been. It's like I said, they're so in this middle ground. If they want to be a football school that happens to have a university, or a university that just happens to have a football team. Michigan's able to do it. They have great academics and they have a great football team.
Yeah. And obviously Stanford's done it in the past.
Yep, Stanford.
Vanderbilt's doing it right now.
Yeah, exactly. And those are private schools.
Yeah.
If you're going to compare it to state schools, you have to compare to like even Iowa, great academic school. And that's where I think Minnesota wants, I would want Minnesota to be competing with Iowa, competing with Iowa and beating them, winning at least, 2 or 3 times every 5 years against the Hawks. I would take that easily, beating the Badgers on a constant basis. There's only one coach I feel outside of PJ Fleck that I think they can do this job a lot better than PJ. Is just a little down south to Ames, Iowa. Get the Iowa State coach. He recruits really good in Minnesota. You can get him probably pretty cheap. Let's see what we can do with that.
Yeah, but would he leave Ames, Iowa to go to Minneapolis to get his brains beat out in the Big Ten if he doesn't believe that he's got the resources to compete where obviously at Iowa State, any given year, they could win the big conference championship?
Yeah, I'm just saying what I would do if I was the athletic director.
Yeah.
And try to, have them at least, okay, we're not going to do what we did with PJ. We're going to start paying at least middle of the road in the Big Ten on our our other coaches, the AOCs and defensive coordinators. You know.
All right, Dave. We've got some other calls coming in, but we appreciate you stopping by. And
All right.
unfortunately, you can't hang out and be anticipating seeing Minnesota ranked in the playoff top 25.
All right, I'm just gonna say, Sky Ma, row the boat and fire up chips.
There we
Fire
go.
up chips. Come on, Central.
Stuff from Dave stopping by. We got Trey on the line as well. Want to invite everyone, obviously, to hang out with us as we watch the playoff reveal. While we've got Trey on the line, I'm going to look up to see exactly when the playoff rankings are dropping tonight. It's usually around 7:30 to 8 o'clock, depending on ESPN. They can't say, you know what, we're going to do this every week at 8 o'clock Eastern time. They have to say, well, we got this basketball game on this week, and we want to do it between these two games. Then we want to do it at halftime over here. So it jumps all over the place. And that's another indication that TV rules everything. All right. Trey's stopping by to talk some college football with us. Trey, what's going on?
I can't wait to see these rankings, Mark. And until then, hopefully I'm on the right time. I planned this out. I want to see the first reaction of this. And hopefully it goes right. If it don't, it's just how it is. I'm excited for rivalry week first. The first two colors, the Michigan guy and the Iowa guy had some really interesting conversations. I enjoyed them talking. Ohio State and Michigan is the big game. I mean, I love that game, especially the last couple of years. My favorite game from Michigan and Ohio State was in 2006 when Troy Smith versus Chad Henne, and they were both undefeated. That was the best game for a long time for me until 2013 Alabama and Auburn. That game had a lot of stuff going on that game, Mark.
Well, it certainly did. We all watched Nick Saban try a 50-some-yard field goal. And, Auburn was stupid enough to have a guy back there and think he could return it all the way for a touchdown. Here we go.
I mean, that was a good Auburn team, too. I like Nick Marshall and Trey Mason that year. I was actually, even though I'm a Gator fan, I was a fan of Auburn for that year. There was something about that team.
There was something about that team. Yeah.
It made me want to pull for them, too. They were interesting.
I did, too. They ran that triple option offense. They were the only team other than the military academies with Nick Marshall at quarterback, and Trey Mason did have a monster year, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And obviously they went up 21-3 in the BCS championship game and almost won that national championship. And before that, of course, they had the two miracles in 3 weeks. People remember the kick six, and a lot of people forget they've got a nickname for it, but the bomb that they needed against Georgia, and the ball got deflected up in the air and perfectly
I forgot what it's called. I think it's like the prayer at Jordan Hare.
Yeah, that's it.
That was actually crazy. It was something about that team. They got lucky twice in 3 weeks.
Yeah, that team had a remarkable rushing attack.
Oh my gosh! And the only team that was able to beat them and that should beat them, and the BCS had ever had the best matchup was Florida State and Auburn. If Auburn didn't win it, it was going to be Jameis Winston and FSU. They were unstoppable, and they were incredibly annoying because I had to face them for 2 years with Jameis Winston, and I couldn't stand them. And I hate Florida State more than Georgia at this point, especially what Mike Norvell cried about last year. If you didn't like the flag planted in your field, you should have beat us. That could have been. That's the most easiest solution. And Billy Napier, if you saw Billy Napier, actually smiled at the end of it. That was actually pretty funny. And that's the only time I liked Billy, because I was like, yeah, you don't take no crap from Mike Norvell. I mean, he's a guy I couldn't take seriously. I hate Florida State. Even the guy, I got pretty much a lot of people that go there, I know, and Florida and Miami and those three colleges. But if I was going to rank my rivals, it'd be Florida State 1, then it'd be 2 be Georgia, and 3 is Tennessee, and 4 is LSU. So that's and Miami's like right under them. We don't face them enough to be over LSU or Georgia or
Yep.
Florida State. We don't face them. We haven't faced them that often since the 2000s. But it doesn't mean I don't hate them either. But I'm very excited for rivalry. I'm glad Texas A&M is back. That's a good game. I love the Egg Bowl. That game always have some interesting fights. Especially
Yes.
Ole Miss and everybody's like
Intense.
underrated it. They are so
Man.
underrated. They are so underrated game. They had some
Yes.
incredible games.
Trey, I had the pleasure of covering that series for 7 years. And I was a sports director at a CBS station in Mississippi.
gosh.
And yeah, I saw that is a intense rivalry. One of the first things I heard about that rivalry when I first got to Mississippi, which I knew it was a rivalry. I was a big college football fan, so I had watched the game occasionally and knew of it. But there was this myth of sorts that one year one of the teams was lining up for the game-winning field goal, and the wind just blew the ball just completely. I don't know if you remember, there was a Chicago Bears game about 10 years ago that the wind was so strong. You'll have to look it up on YouTube sometime.
Okay.
The wind was so strong, the punts and the field goals totally like blew off to the side of the field.
What was it versus the Packers?
Yes. And
oh my God. That was a good game.
State kick where they're lining up. And I didn't believe it when somebody told me. They said the kick was perfect and the wind just totally blew it off to like the side of the field. And I'm like, oh, come on. And then they showed it to me and I'm like, that's unbelievable. And then, I got to cover the game and yeah, it's a phenomenal rivalry. And like you say, it's extremely intense. Those people are very proud football fans, even though they don't produce the kind of numbers on TV because they just don't have the population. The amount of talent that gets produced in that state is ridiculous.
I would say that about Virginia Tech too. It's actually a very intense too, especially recently about the ACC when they had divisional.
Yes.
Especially for that Coastal in 2018, 2019, 2020. They were fighting for a Coastal division between these two. It just recently started getting better. And I'm not shocked if Virginia Tech beats Virginia this weekend, really.
No, I won't be either.
Virginia Boys Tech has their number.
Yeah, just to update some people here, Trey. So the deal is that the playoff rankings get revealed after the conclusion at the end of this basketball game that I just pulled up ESPN. So for you basketball fans, USC and Seton Hall are tied at 78 with 29 seconds left. So if somebody can win this game, the playoff rankings are going to come out in just a couple minutes. But if they go to overtime, then that's going to push us back. So that's where we stand on the playoff rankings reveal.
I want to know. I'm looking at the old ones, and I cannot wait because I'm doing it with you for a little bit. I want to know, is anybody going to jump over Notre Dame? That's been a topic this week. Will anybody jump over Notre Dame? I don't think they should, but how the committee, they think everybody then different than mostly the people. If they was going to jump it, will it be Alabama? Will it be BYU, Utah, Miami? Because Miami been like the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've been climbing a little bit. Are they trying to make up what they did versus a head-to-head battle versus Notre Dame?
Kind of seems like they are. They are creeping up Miami. They're inching them up every week, and they are trying to correct their initial botching of the rankings is what it appears is going on.
But don't you think it's kind of strange that's getting late and you want to correct it? They should have put them ahead. I wouldn't have been mad if they just go ahead and just put them above Notre Dame. And I understand that, that's a head-to-head. Miami's a good team. And I understand they did face each other. Now they're two completely different teams than what they were now. But I understand about honoring the head-to-head.
Yeah. Well, let's understand something, Trey. And maybe somebody has some insight in the chat and they can educate me, because I must admit that my knowledge of the inner workings of college football is not what it was a couple years ago. because I'm just not as involved all day, every day. But you can run committees different ways, meaning you can say, you know what? Everything involved, we just take votes. That's all we do. You got your vote, Trey. I got my vote. Jim's got his vote. Sally's got her vote. And then we just add them up. We just take a blind vote. And, if we all have Ohio State number 1, but somebody's got them number 4 and somebody's got them number 5, the points weigh out to them dropping to number 2. And, it's just like a AP rankings where the points determine. Or they come up with a process that they say, we leave this room and we have to agree 1 through 25. And so we're going to argue until we have a consensus that these are our 25 teams, 1 through 25. And we're not voting, we're deciding. And I don't know where that stands. I don't know how they go about coming up with these rankings, because I will guarantee you, Trey, that there are people in that room that obviously believe Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Miami because they just think they're a better football team. I'll make the Notre Dame case that they have played more consistently since the first or second week of the season, number 1. Number 2, that game was at Miami, and it was played by the narrowest conditions. It's a walk-off field goal. So basically, if you listen to Vegas, that's a neutral. That's a tie game at a neutral site. That was CJ Carr's first game he ever played. So you got a freshman quarterback having to play a senior quarterback in Carson Beck.
Yep, and they almost beat him too. That should count. Well, we don't. We don't count
on Notre Dame side. And if you want to compare the losses, which I always argue for the head-to-head, but if you want to compare the losses, obviously Notre Dame's losses are much better than Miami's losses, and their wins are about the same. Who is other than Miami beating Notre Dame, that's obviously a better win than anything Notre Dame has. After that, Notre Dame's best win is your Pitt team. USC, then probably Pitt. Those would be their 2 standout wins for Notre Dame.
I would say that, like you just said, I'm glad you made this point. CJ Carr was making his first start, and he almost beat Miami. And Miami has a great defense. They sure do.
Yeah.
But imagine if they played again, if it was not the first week, and it would have been this week or last week or the last 2-3 weeks. Notre Dame, we'd be talking a different story, but they played in week 1. You are very definitely right. Notre Dame has played more consistent. I think we know more about Notre Dame than we do Miami. We don't know what Miami have one good week and one other week. They're losing to Louisville, and then they almost lost. They didn't play very well versus Virginia Tech in my eye. They could have smashed the crap out of them Virginia Tech, but they didn't. So we are in more questions with Miami. And I will even say this on a limb. Not only Miami, what about BYU? We thought BYU was unstoppable. They have not been playing consistent. And I will even say Utah now. I was on their bandwagon, Mark. And now Kansas State runs up 45 points. Is that just a stroke of luck? And they didn't think about Kansas State being that much of a threat? Or did they just got exposed? And it can be possible to run the score up versus Utah, but Texas Tech was the only one to do that before them.
I watched the extended highlights of that game, like 20, 25 minutes of highlights. Like I watched like 50 plays of that Utah-Kansas State game. And I had to check the box score because I'm thinking Kansas State is running the ball down their throats. How many yards did they run for? 472 yards rushing.
Now, that's not a Kyle Willingham team right there.
That's unbelievable.
Did he even throw a pass in that game?
Barely. They probably shouldn't have. 51-47. And Kansas State was up 2 scores. They were up like 47-35. Yeah, 47-35 with about only like 4 minutes left. And I'm watching these highlights thinking, how did they blow this? Well, they blew it. Give Utah credit for coming back and winning. But if Kansas State would have managed the game better, they should have run out the clock and won the game.
So what that was, that reminds me of the Florida Georgia game back in
Yeah.
2014, 2015. All we did is like run the ball. That was basically what Kansas State did. The other question is, since Utah did not play very well and BYU didn't play very well recently, how about we all forgetting? We all about talking about Michigan and Texas, but Michigan, now they're closing the gap. Now, think about it, Georgia Tech falling out, USC's falling out. They are closing the gap more than people think they are. They could be around 13 or 14 guys. And I think they just need a really good showing versus Ohio State and beat Ohio State. They're going to be in.
Well, Michigan was at 18. So let's follow it here. They're going to move ahead of Georgia Tech. They're going to move ahead of USC, even though I don't have them ahead of USC, but they will. USC and Georgia Tech. So they should be. I don't see anybody else dropping.
I think that
unless they really knock Utah for that close. But I don't think Utah beating Kansas State and Michigan just beating Maryland. I don't think that's enough to make up 18.
I'll tell you why it will affect Utah. And personally, I would not have that affect them. But seeing the committee, how they've been acting, this is very tight between Vanderbilt, Miami, Utah, BYU, Alabama, Notre Dame. Those guys, those 5 or 6 teams, I think is closer than people think it is. They are all very similar records, and all of them are very good teams. All right. I think Utah could take a couple steps back here. This is the time you would not want to do that. It's just way too close. The conference championships is next week, and I think it really would hurt Utah. I think they'll get stepped back 1 or 2 positions, and I think Michigan might even take over Utah, because we did see Utah get blown up by Texas Tech, and that was early in the year. But since they did it again, do you think they get penalized for the second time? They got exposed more than 45 points.
Yeah, I don't see it that way. Just because whatever the committee has taken into consideration concerning Utah or anyone else, that's already been factored into the ranking going into this week. You know what I mean? They've already accounted for that. Now, the one thing that can change is if, let's see, what would be a good example of this? Would be, I'm trying to think of a team that's changed quite a bit from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Regardless of whether they're in the playoffs or not. So a team's resume can change quite a bit, like Ohio State. Let's say Ohio State, not that they have anything to worry about, but in evaluating their schedule in week 2 or 3, you're looking at Texas and saying, well, they might be the best team in the country. Well, here we are, week 12, week 13, and the evaluation is, well, that's a good win, but it's not the win that we thought it was, because Texas. And so Ohio State's resume takes a bit of a hit because Texas has not been as good.
No, I would even take Michigan. Oh, if they had to play today, and it would be Michigan and Texas, I would take Michigan over Texas, and Michigan would beat Texas, in my opinion. I think they're just rough. I think they're rougher. I think they have just completed their best game. I'll be careful underrating Michigan. This is their time. It's starting to get together. And the last couple of years versus Ohio State, they have put it together when people didn't think so, especially last year. Now they're 10-2. This is actually some high stakes. Maybe not for Ohio State, because they're going to be in regardless. But for Michigan, everything's right in front of them. Will they rise to the occasion versus Ohio State and beat Ohio State and get in to the playoffs and also go to the Big Ten championship maybe?
Yeah, I mentioned this last night. I had hoped to get to all these tie-breaking scenarios, but it pretty much works out in the Big Ten as, of course, Ohio State and Michigan, I'm sorry, if Ohio State and Indiana win, they're in the Big Ten championship game.
Yes.
If Michigan beats Ohio State, then it really muddies things up. If Indiana
Oh,
loses,
my.
which first of all, nobody expects Indiana is going to lose to Purdue,
No.
that would be a major. That would be the biggest upset of the season. So so Indiana's. Let's
Oh,
just
Lord.
assume that they won. If Ohio State wins, then that's the game. If Michigan wins, then it really factors into what Oregon does, because then the common opponent's winning percentage and their schedule winning percentage comes into it. Actually, the common opponents doesn't, because if you think about it, all of them beat all of their common opponents because they beat all those teams. What comes into it is the schedule winning percentage, and that's where Oregon has it over Michigan because they play a tougher Big Ten schedule.
I want to know how far. Where is Oregon in the rankings?
They are
Okay, they are
7.
I want to know. It will not affect them if they not going to the Big Ten championship. I do not think. I mean, Big Ten championship. I think they're a shoe-in at this point. As long as you're above Notre Dame, I think you're pretty safe if you're above Notre Dame.
Oh yes, Oregon's fine if they win.
Yeah.
They're going to be
I
11-1.
don't think it matters if they even go to the Big Ten championship, but everything's right in front of Michigan. Now, it'll be a different conversation if we have Texas beat Texas A&M. Now, that would not be a monkey wrench into this conversation. That would be very interesting, but I would still not have Texas in. I'll tell you what, they lost to Florida and they lost to they got smashed by Georgia. I mean, if you put Texas in the playoff, even if they beat Texas A&M, you got to look who they lost to, and they got dominated. Now Florida really dominated Texas most of that game.
Yep.
And yet again, Georgia dominates Texas. There was nothing going with Texas. You got to also look at Arch Manning. I don't think he's ready. He's just going to get humiliated in the playoffs. It's just going to be like that Cincinnati. Who was that in the Big East at one time? Or Athletic American Conference? It was, I think it was Cincinnati that went to the playoffs and got stomped. That's just going to be like Texas. It could be like that. So even if they even beat Texas A&M, they should not be in. I think they need a lot more help than people realize. I hope that the playoff committee does the right thing and have Notre Dame stay where they are. I think Alabama stays where they are. BYU and Utah gets jumped by Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt should jump those two because Kentucky is even though they don't have the best record, I think it shows how good of a team they actually are. Despise their record, they're a really tough team and they give teams tough time. I think that counts for something. So I think Vanderbilt jumps Utah and BYU.
Well, just to make things interesting and buy some time before we get our rankings, which they're going to start to be revealed here in just a second. The basketball game's over and ESPN's on. Let me try to get Texas into the playoff. Let me do my best to try to figure out how they could get into the playoff. They need Washington to beat Oregon. Then you knock Oregon down to 10-2, and Texas may have a better resume than Oregon, even though they're only 9-3. So that's one part of it that they need. They need BYU to be out of the way. They need either them to lose this week or lose badly in the conference championship game, and the Big 12 to be a one-bid league, the ACC to be a one-bid league. Georgia Tech loses to Georgia, and just Virginia wins the ACC championship, let's say, and nobody else factors in.
Mm-hmm.
They could really get helped by Pitt beating Miami.
Oh, that'd be interesting
to get them out of the way. So let's say because of those things that I just mentioned, you only have one out of the ACC, one out of the Big 12. I'm not going to go so crazy to say Notre Dame's going to lose to Stanford. We're not going to get that crazy.
I'll be careful. Stanford did show some stuff in the last couple of weeks. They did be a okay Cal team. Cal ain't trash.
Yeah.
But Stanford, I'll be careful with that rivalry.
Okay.
That's a weird.
All right. I'm not going to be careful and say I'm going to say Notre Dame's going to stop them. Okay, we got rankings coming in here.
All right.
We've got Arizona 25, Tulane's 24, Georgia Tech's 23, Pitt's 22, and SMU's 21.
Ooh, they really penalized Georgia Tech. Oh my!
So that's where we stand for the first 5, and obviously Tulane is the class of the American Conference. And there's a big game in the American Conference on I believe that's on Thanksgiving night.
I think it's like Navy and Memphis.
Navy and Memphis. So that's one to look out for. But as it stands right now, as long as Tulane wins out, they are going to be the group of 5 team. All right, we got the next bunch here. We got Arizona State at 20. Where'd they come from? All right,
Whoa.
Tennessee's at 19. Virginia 18, USC 17, and Texas 16. And obviously, we'll get the rankings up there as soon as possible, as soon as somebody posts them. So, yes, they dropped USC from 15 to 17 behind Texas by 1 spot. And really, with Virginia, it doesn't matter where they're ranked. They have to win the ACC.
They just got to win the ACC. I think the ACC champion. I don't think they're going to be any more bids for them. It's just got to be the champion, I think. Georgia Tech ruined that one.
Then we've got Michigan, just came in at 15. And again, that's Texas 16 and USC 17. So Michigan's up 3 spots. And now they're going to start to drag this out. So Michigan's at 15. And I would look up the ESPN feed and show it, but they'll demonetize me for that. I'll get a copyright flag from our friends at YouTube. All right, Michigan at 15. Let's see if we're going to get our number 14 team. And I hope the battery on my phone lasts long enough. Vandy is at 14. So they moved up from, well, they stayed put. And I think the rest of it's going to stay the same unless they swap Miami and jump them up past Utah, because Utah struggled. That might happen. And there's a small possibility that they give Oregon some bonus points for beating USC. Maybe. Okay, Utah's at 13. They did that. They knocked down Utah for the close win against Kansas State. And this is another way that they're inching Miami up. They're up to number 12. And now we got to think that BYU's at 11. So again, Michigan at 15, Vandy at 14, Utah at 13, Miami at 12. And so again, we can expect the rest to be the same, except maybe Oregon gets a boost. Maybe.
Wow, that Utah, when they got knocked down, they actually came in line with Miami. I thought it would happen. That was just the right time and justified to move down Utah and Miami to jump them.
So basically, that's a death knell for Utah, because Miami's got, Utah's got an insignificant game, and Miami's got Pitt. They're going to get bonus points for that. So BYU's at 11. And again, I think the rest of this is going to play out the way it's already ranked from last week, except maybe Oregon gets.
Would they allow Alabama to jump Notre Dame? If Notre Dame gets jumped,
why are they going to get jumped by Alabama after Alabama beat a high school football team last weekend? No, they're not going to do anything with those two.
All right, okay.
No, nothing happened this past weekend.
So I'm not shocked. They actually moved Michigan up, and I'm surprised they did not punish USC as much as I thought. I'm not going to say anybody else. I thought they'd be in 19, 20, 21, but only 17. That's not too far behind either. They're still in striking distance a little bit.
Well, no, they've lost 3 games.
Hell yeah. But they really punished Georgia Tech, though. I mean, they
Well,
really
Michigan
punished
moved
them.
ahead of USC and Georgia Tech.
Yeah. But I'm just surprised how they punished Georgia Tech, man. They like you basically for the ACC. If you win the championship, you're in because there's no other way other teams can get in that conference. And you're right about Utah. Unless something happens, I think that's the end of Utah in that conversation. To
Yeah,
be honest
there's
with
going to
you,
have to be a lot that's going to have to happen.
yeah, I feel sorry for Utah. I think if they would have dominated Kansas State how they're supposed to, I don't think Miami would have moved up. To be honest with you, Mark, I think it would have stayed the same.
So again, Oklahoma's come in at 8. They stay at 8. Notre Dame at 9. Bama at 10. And we're just looking to see what happens, if anything, with Ole Miss and Oregon. We got to Real MVP as our next caller. Trey, it's good talking to you. Appreciate you being here.
All right, thank you.
And join us again, of course. We're always here for you.
All right, thank you, Mark.
All right, Trey. All right, Darrell, we'll have Darrell jump on here. Darrell, what do you think? What's going on?
Hello, Mark. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm watching the ranking show, and like I'm saying, Ole Miss is 7. That's a bit of a shocker. So Oregon is going to move up for their.
Yeah, so that's the only thing I somewhat conjectured on that we needed to wait on. That was it. Yeah, they gave Oregon a lot of credit for beating USC by 2 scores.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising to me that they have Ole Miss. Yeah, they did flop Oregon and Ole Miss. That Ole Miss is the worst 10-1 team if they're just comparing losses, because their only loss is a 7-point loss to Georgia, who's going to be number 4 in the country. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think, again, there's a little recency bias playing in here and really not sizing up the Ole Miss resume versus Oregon's resume.
right. I don't understand how Texas and Michigan flipped this week. Like, I understand Michigan and Texas both moving up 2 spots because USC and Georgia Tech lost. I understand that. But I don't know what Michigan did that was so impressive that they jumped Texas. I mean, if I would argue Texas had their most complete game of the season, at least on the offensive side of the ball, and they blew out an Arkansas team who, again, is 2-9, and they're not that good of a football team. But
yeah, that's a really good call on your part, and I totally agree, because if you evaluate Maryland as a football team and Arkansas as a football team, yeah, well, let's not write home about a win against either one of those teams. But if either one of those 2 teams has shown that they can compete with some of the best teams in the country, it's Arkansas. Maryland has never shown that capability. Arkansas has played with Texas A&M down to the wire. They've played with Ole Miss. They played with Tennessee. You know, they've been able to, regardless of the record, show that they have the talent and ability to play a high level of football. And Maryland does not show that capability at all.
right. And I know Texas has 3 losses. Somebody in the chat wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Last week, they also had 3 losses, and they weren't ahead of Michigan.
Exactly.
Has nothing to do with the amount of losses. I'm just using the committee's own standard.
Yeah.
The reason they're doing this, Mark, to me, is a signal that if they beat Ohio State, they'll be the final team in the college football playoff. That's what the indication is. If they wanted to get rid of Texas, beating Texas A&M and Michigan beating Ohio State, that's what they wanted to do. That's why they moved up. That's my opinion. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
That would be it. This committee, more so, or maybe my memory's just short, they've shown us, beyond trying to figure out their approach, you have to figure out, okay, why are they making some of these moves? Because some of them don't make sense. And that's one right there. And you don't have to be a fan of any team or rooting for or against any team like a Michigan fan. It has nothing to do with being a Michigan fan or rooting against Michigan. That logic makes absolutely no sense. If they believe that Michigan's got a better resume than Texas, then that should have been that should have been shown last week. Because if anything, in my estimation, which I think is rock solid in this case, Texas win against Arkansas, in which Arkansas scored in the last 20 seconds of the game, by the way. Texas was winning by 22 points, is a better win than Michigan's win against Maryland.
Right, and if anything, at the top of the resume, Michigan suffered the worst because USC, which is one of their losses,
Well,
got
there you go.
absolutely crushed.
Yeah, if you want to evaluate that, Texas, some of their key games, can't really think of anything that really stands out that much. Florida got trounced, but was Florida really a key component in this? I guess maybe the rest. Again, the committee's going to use whatever data points that they can chase after and grab to defend their point. So maybe they would say, you know what? We thought Florida was a decent football team, but they just got trounced by Tennessee. So that makes that Texas loss look even worse. They could grab that. But Oklahoma turns around and beats Missouri by 2 scores, and that turns into a better win for Texas than it even was last week.
Right. And to me, Mark, this is exactly what I talked about yesterday with you, is that Miami, if they jump Utah, they're in prime position now to make the college football playoff because Alabama and BYU both have to play. If BYU loses and Alabama wins or loses, Miami's going to be 1 spot behind Notre Dame. There's no Mark. If the committee at 1 spot away keeps Notre Dame ahead of Miami, then they've just lost all credibility. I understand it even being 3 spots, there's somewhat of a gap, but the teams in front of Miami play. So Notre Dame has nothing. They're not going to be moved down. They're going to be moved past by a different team.
Yes.
So Notre Dame's going to be the last team in, which means we've got to compare Notre Dame to a 10-2 Michigan, a 10-2 Vandy, a 9-3 Texas. That's where the argument's going to come down to. And to me, is it a signal that they are comparing Vanderbilt and saying their current resume is better than Michigan? I don't know how much. I would assume the Ohio State win is going to have a ton of weight to it. But is that going to be enough to propel them past Vanderbilt and past Notre Dame? I don't know. It'll be close because the committee will do whatever they want and find whatever excuse they want to figure it out. I would think they would probably get in, possibly, but who knows with this committee, Mark?
Yeah, it's just funny that regardless of the Miami Notre Dame situation, if they have the same record, so what you just sized up, if they get Miami to the position where they're right behind Notre Dame, they're obviously going to lose credibility. Because then that blow.
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to let you know that I think you bumped into your mic when you moved your arm. The people in the chat saying they can't hear you. I wonder if you all in the chat can hear me. To me, the bottom in the ranking also wasn't surprising with Houston moving out. That wasn't shocking to me. SMU being ranked at 21 is basically exactly what I thought they were going to be. To me, with SMU being ranked that high, that tells me the James Madison and North Texas / Tulane scenario was basically off the table because those two Group of 5 conferences just aren't in the place where I don't think they can be justifiably ranked ahead of the ACC champion, with Virginia being ranked, SMU being ranked, Pitt being ranked. So I think the ACC, at least the scenario is still they're most likely in. I know there is some crazy scenario where a 6-5 or 7-5 Duke team can still make the ACC title, which would be insane if a 5-loss Duke team made the ACC title. But outside of that scenario, I think they're going to get a team in. So, if you all had to look at the rankings, what team in the rankings do you think is overrated, underrated? What team do you think maybe entered the ranking or is unranked that should have entered the ranking this week? Is there any team that you think that is you think's too high or too low in the rankings? What are your thoughts on the rankings? Mark, they still can't hear you. The only person they can hear is me still, just as an FYI. So you're all good. I agree with Mike Ford's comment in the chat, though, about Ohio State's schedule. If you look at their schedule, the only great team that they've played this year is the Texas Longhorns, which has been their closest game of the season by far. So if you are a Michigan man at this point in the season, that would be I would say your main argument for saying why they can win this game, other than the mental hurdle and the fact you've beaten them the last 4 times, is Michigan is the second, maybe the first best team that Ohio State is going to play this year, and they haven't looked exactly as stellar like in years past, where they've looked absolutely untouchable against the cupcakes they've been playing. Normally, they just smash them by 40, 50, 60 points, whereas this year it's only again, 30 or 20 points. So, would it shock me if Michigan beat Ohio State? Absolutely not. I do think Ohio State will win this game, but after last year, anything's possible in this game.
Can anyone?
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
Matter of just, again, a big reset. Okay, very good. So let me ask you this. Hang on. Still hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's go back to where I was, and that's in regards to running down these rankings and where we may have some issues. Again, Oregon had a much weaker schedule at one point than Ole Miss. They've picked up wins against Iowa and USC. Ole Miss, best wins. Who are we looking at here? Oklahoma. LSU 7-4. Anybody else on the Ole Miss schedule you can think of that would be a quality win? Oklahoma, LSU. Is that
Don't
pretty
think
much
so.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Oregon, USC, and Iowa lost to Indiana. I would rank Ole Miss's loss to Georgia to be slightly more impressive. It was on the road, and it was a game in which they led by 9 points in the fourth quarter. Thought Oregon was dominated a little bit more against Indiana. I would not necessarily have made that move that they made there with Oregon and Ole Miss, but both teams have the season right in front of them. What in terms of clinching a spot and controlling their own destiny, it's obviously going to affect matchups, and it's going to affect it's possible it could affect a home game. Probably not.
Well, the reason it's so important is it's the 6-7 seed, and if you're the 6, you're playing the ACC champion, most likely. If you're the 7, you're playing a legit team. So the 6-7 line is going to be a massive distinction this year.
Next in line, I would have to reference my rankings, but I don't necessarily. I have no issue with Miami being ranked ahead of Utah. I think that they have much better wins. The losses, Utah lost to BYU by 3. They got blasted by Texas Tech. So Utah's losses are better, but I'm not a big fan of losses unless you play extremely well. And of course, Utah didn't in one of those games. Miami's 2 losses. SMU's got well, obviously they both played each other, the 2 teams that Miami played and lost to last week. So I don't have an issue with Miami jumping Utah. Not a big
If anything,
issue
I have an issue with Vanderbilt still being ranked behind Utah. I think Vanderbilt
Yeah.
has had the better resume for about a month now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Of course, let's see, Vandy's got the Bama loss. They've got the Texas loss. Those are better. Those are more competitive losses than the one Utah lost. Definitely there. Yeah, I'm a big Vandy guy. I've got Vandy up at 9. So you see what I think of them versus Utah at 14. I would still rank USC above Michigan. And I know some people are going to go crazy about that because the records aren't the same, but they played head to head and USC won the game convincingly. And the reason that they dropped behind Michigan is that they just lost to the number 6 team in the country on the road by 2 scores, which seems to be pretty reasonable compared to Michigan losing to the 2 best teams on their schedule by 18 points and by 11 points. So Michigan lost by 3 scores and 2 scores to the best 2 teams on their schedule. So what USC did at Oregon seems to be in line with, and if you watch the game, a more competitive game. Is 28-21 in the fourth quarter, then that's stupid reasoning. And of course, the Texas-Michigan thing makes absolutely no sense. And again, it's not about Michigan being in front of Texas. It's about Michigan jumping Texas after Texas beat a better football team.
Well, we know why they're doing it, Mark. It's because of the political game of where we have a strong inclination that the reason they're doing it is they're sending a signal that if Michigan beats Ohio State, they have less teams to jump, since they've naturally jumped Texas this week. And USC, if they place them behind, people would say, well, there's a hard ceiling for Michigan.
Was Arizona State not ranked last week? I don't think they were.
No, I don't think they were.
I don't know what they beat, like Colorado.
I think it's just the product of the teams.
Sure.
Yes, they did beat Colorado.
Yeah,
losing. I think that's what it is.
That's pretty severe, but that's fine. They're not affecting anything that I can think of. I don't even think BYU played Arizona State, so that doesn't really impact anything. Arizona sneaking in at 25. There's a direct impact on the schedule for BYU in particular. SMU jumping in at 21. I'm fine with that. They just pasted Louisville. They've beaten Miami in recent weeks. SMU, 2 losses by a field goal, I believe, on the last play of the game to both TCU and to Baylor. And the third loss, I'm not coming up with it. SMU lost to somebody bad.
Some ACC team that just
exactly. They lost
some garbage ACC team.
Oh, they lost to Wake by 1 point. Yes,
exactly. Okay, some garbage ACC team.
Yes, that's a bad loss, and I know Wake's got a respectable record, but okay, SMU should be in front of Pitt. I'm good with Pitt being in front of Georgia. So the Pitt Georgia Tech reasoning seems very much in line with what I'm talking about with USC beating Michigan and having a worse record. Better schedule, tougher opponents, won the game convincingly by 3 scores. Same deal with Pitt and Georgia Tech. Don't get it in the case of Michigan and USC. Tulane, obviously, they control their own destiny. And those are the issues.
25?
25 Arizona.
Okay, so they still don't have James Madison or North Texas ranked or anything like that. It's a little bit surprising that another team in the G5 race isn't ranked, but I'm happy with that. To me, this, like I said while you were muted, is just confirmation that the G5 getting 2 teams in is all but dead. Like,
Yeah.
And it's going to be the American team because North Texas is 10-1. I know they lost their head coach today, but if they win that conference with a 2-game sample size and one of them being to the 24th best team in the country, they should be in the college football playoff. Now they'll get absolutely pasted because they're going to play Georgia, or Alabama, or Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, somebody like that. So they got no real chance. But hey, good luck for Tulane. Head coach doesn't even believe they're a top 25 team in the country, by the way, Mark. I'm not sure if you saw that. Doing a good job advocating his spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I did hear that prior to their previous week game, which was nothing super impressive. But yeah, I don't know what he was looking to accomplish. He must have just been that frustrated with his team's play that he didn't care what. And hopefully that doesn't impact the committee. If that's the case, then that's pitiful, but he should still be smarter than that.
Right. Well, it clearly didn't. They're still 24th. They play Charlotte this week, who's legitimately one of the worst teams in all of football at 1-10. They're 30.5-point favorites, so they should win this game. I'll ask you, it seems like we're pretty, we thought there was going to be a ton of chaos, tons of crazy scenarios that can happen. And it feels like we already kind of know what's going to happen, assuming nothing insane happens.
Well, most likely something insane somewhere, not the most insane scenario, but a portion of it, a game or two will happen. But let's just say that we get a chalk weekend. So from the top, the key games are won by Ohio State and Indiana advance to the Big Ten championship game. They win their games. Let's say Texas A&M beats Texas, and so that just becomes a foregone conclusion. Texas A&M marches on, and Texas is toast. Georgia beats Georgia Tech. Texas Tech, BYU don't get upset. They're clear into the Big 12 championship game. Oregon gets a playoff spot. They beat Washington. Ole Miss wins. Oklahoma beats LSU, et cetera, on down the line. Miami beats Pitt. Yeah, let's even give so we've got some decisions to make. Vandy beats Tennessee on the road. Really nice win there. And, Virginia takes care of business. They're in the ACC championship game. All right, so that's pretty much all we need to figure out.
Right. To me, the chaos isn't going to happen this week. It's going to happen next week, if in conference championship game. Because if BYU wins, you're eliminating the spot at large spot from 10-9. Yeah. So that's, to me, the only real, oh crap, we don't know what's going to happen situation. Because if Michigan beats Ohio State, to me, they're the 10th seed. That's where they'll fall. If Vanderbilt somehow, I think Vanderbilt's done, to be honest with you. I don't see how you can get them into the college football playoff with a win over the 19th best team in the country. I know it's a solid win, but are they going to move them 4 spots to pass Notre Dame after all this time and resilience of just keeping Notre Dame that high? I personally don't think so. I think if they would have done something like that, they would have moved them past Utah this week to at least show some inclination of that. Texas, to me, is also the same. They're just too far down the rankings to move up that many spots. So I think this thing is really cut and dry. There's only 13 or 14 teams at this point that I believe have any chance to make the college football playoff.
Well, how much does Vandy need? Do they need Bama loss in the Iron Bowl? Forget Notre Dame. We just assume they're going to beat Stanford. A reasonable upset loss.
They need BYU to lose. They need Miami probably. I think they need Miami to lose as well. Or Miami or Alabama to lose. They need 3.
Or BYU to win this week and get annihilated in the conference championship game.
Right, but they have to. Vanderbilt has to get to the 10th seed. So if you remove them, because Miami's going to move up past if they're going to move to number 9 at least, no matter what happens in the Alabama game. If they lose to Texas A&M, they're going to fall behind them. If they win, they're going to jump ahead of Notre Dame. So what Alabama does is almost irregardless. Because to me, that's the issue for Vanderbilt. They can't pass Miami. So you're adding a team that's not in the equation to the equation. So
Well, they can't pass Miami unless Miami loses.
Right, but are they going to?
What needs to happen for Vandy?
They need
a Miami loss. They need a BYU loss
and Alabama to lose.
Yes,
because you have to get to 10. So that it's just they're just not. That's not all that is going to happen.
BYU in a championship game, Bama, Miami. Yeah, that's a tough parlay to run. But BYU could lose the Big 12 championship game badly. Are they going to lose this week? They're playing one of the worst teams in the conference. I forget who.
I think they're playing West Virginia.
Okay, West Virginia. No, I think it's Texas Tech, West Virginia. I think BYU's got UCF. They've got UCF at home.
I know they're like what?
So there you
18, 20. They're massive favorites.
Yeah, for them to lose to UCF team playing out the schedule at home, I just can't imagine. But so most likely Vandy's help would come by way of BYU getting just whipped like they did the first time against Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. And I would hope that Vandy at 10-2 would get the nod over BYU at 11-2.
Right, but they still would be out in that scenario. Because they would, if the only BYU, they would only jump up to 12.
Sure, but I'm knocking out Bama loses the Iron Bowl, BYU loses, and Miami loses to Pitt.
Okay.
And obviously Vandy's going to jump Utah with a much better win this week. You would think that they would jump Utah.
You would need all three of those things to happen in order for Vanderbilt to make the playoffs.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. That's what we need. Okay. Unless the unthinkable and Stanford beats Notre Dame.
Which they're 30.5-point favorites this week?
Or LSU beats Oklahoma. They're only 10-point underdogs.
Okay. Well, it gets into a conversation of does the 3-loss Oklahoma team get in over the 2-loss Vanderbilt team when Oklahoma's played a much more difficult schedule? And also, does this box out Michigan? So do they take Oklahoma and Michigan and it's like a combo to where we're not going to settle the head-to-head debate and we're just going to put them both in at 9 and 10. I think that's probably what they would end up doing if Oklahoma were to lose to LSU.
Yeah, Oklahoma loses to Texas, but Mateer's hurt or hobbled in that game, not playing his best, and they've obviously already dealt with that issue and told us that they're taking that into consideration. Yeah, Oklahoma loses to Ole Miss, who's safely in the field. They lose. The LSU loss would not be a good one. It's not a horrific one, but it's not a good one.
Right, but Oklahoma would have by far the 2 best wins. And their wins are against teams that they're in the conversation with, which I think helps them massively. You get to say, hey, we beat potentially the number 2 team in the country or number 3, depending on if Alabama wins the SEC championship. Or if Alabama beats Auburn but loses to Texas A&M, they'll have a bubble win over Michigan and Alabama in that scenario. So I think Oklahoma's bubble wins are just too much to keep them out of the playoffs. It's unfortunate for Vanderbilt because they've done everything they could do realistically this season to make it into the 12-team playoff, but for whatever reason, the committee is not giving them the proper respect that they need because I honestly don't know what they could have done more other than be somewhat more competitive against Alabama in the fourth quarter. I mean, their 2 losses are to Texas and Alabama on the road. I mean, both very justifiable, both very understandable losses. And I watched them play last week. I know Kentucky's not that good of a football team, Mark, but Vanderbilt's a legit good football team.
Yeah.
If they played they could beat anybody.
And
outside of like the top three.
yeah, and I think what that proves is, even though Kentucky's not that good, is it's almost like when we talk about anyone beating Arkansas. Arkansas is not that good either, but Arkansas is not getting blasted by everyone. And so Arkansas has shown an ability, just like Kentucky, on an occasion, not just once this year, but like 3 or 4 times, to play with a really good team. So if Vanderbilt's on the list of teams that annihilated Kentucky and not on the list of teams that barely scraped by them, Texas, Ole Miss, then that's a good list to be on. At least they've differentiated themselves that way. So they are doing what a playoff caliber team should do.
Right. So to me, this gets to my final point, overall point on this ranking. Somebody is going to be absolutely screwed because the ACC and G5 getting a team guaranteed in the college football playoff. I know we believe in conference championships and you have to, it matters and stuff, but shouldn't there be at a certain point where everybody just kind of understands, okay, you've taken too many losses or you're too bad and we just know this team's better than you.
Yeah, but we're not going to have the Duke scenario. So even though people don't believe in Virginia, and I get it, they may be losing a playoff game 42-10. They're going to be an 11-2 football team if they win the ACC.
I understand, Mark, but
this is not going to be
just a
Duke
you
at
are
8
what
and
you're.
5.
I understand, and Duke still can make it. By the way, Duke is not mathematically eliminated from the ACC conference race, believe it or not. But that tells you how bad the ACC is right there. But this isn't just a you are what your record says you are sport, like what people say about the Texas-Michigan thing. I do think we need to factor in how well you do against these teams, your game control efficiency and all that stuff. And for me, just to see these 2 of these 4 playoff games basically be wasted because we're handing out glorified participation trophies to 2 inferior conferences when you have a legitimate team that I think can make has an argument to make a run in the college football playoff is heartbreaking. Now, to me, that doesn't mean we expand the playoffs or anything. That's not the answer. It's just we need to reduce access specifically for the G5.
Well, and it's especially heartbreaking because we're not talking about Georgia or somebody like that having an off year and, oh, boo-hoo, you didn't make the playoff because you went 9-3. We're talking about a team and a program that's like a once-in-a-lifetime achievement to this point, possibility.
Right.
And also to your point, I expected, somebody is going to get screwed, and most likely it's going to be Vandy. And there's really, the way we're weeding through this, apparently, unless like BYU loses a Big 12 championship game and they get left out and they've got 2 losses, there's going to be very few teams where I expected a list of about 5 teams to have an argument. But it doesn't appear to be that long of a list.
Right. And to me, what's so disappointing about Vanderbilt also is the way you said it is that this isn't an every year thing, but their resume, I would argue, is better than what? 4 or 5 teams, or just as good as 4 or 5 teams that are in the college football playoff. Like, it's not like to me that I don't know if you're a Vanderbilt fan or in the administration or whatever, you could realistically do more than these other teams.
Yeah.
Because they went out and scheduled a non-conference game. I know it was against Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech's horrible, but at least they scheduled a non-conference game. They did everything the right way, it feels like, and they're still being left out. And I think that's my problem with it. Is this playoff system was supposed to alleviate these types of situations where you have teams that deserve it, that were not, that deserve to be in, weren't in because of how many teams were in the college football playoff at 4. And now we're running into the same issue at 12.
And under our scenario, Vanderbilt has an argument of having a better resume than Notre Dame, the ACC champion, the group of five, obviously. I guess that would be it.
They might have a better resume or equal to Miami, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, yeah, Miami at that point would have beaten Notre Dame, Pitt.
They beat South Florida, but
I'm struggling for another win. Yeah, South Florida would be it. While Vandy would have Tennessee, LSU, who else? Missouri. And certainly better losses with Bama and Texas versus Louisville and SMU.
right, both of those at the road, where Miami, I know, at least had one home loss as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, it would be Tennessee, LSU, Missouri. So most likely a 9-3. I'm sorry, Tennessee's would be 8-4 with the loss. So 3 8-4 teams, let's say.
Yeah.
Something in that range.
I mean, that's comparable to Miami's resume. I would say Miami has the best win,
Yeah.
but then they would have probably the 5th and 6th win as well, whereas
Sure.
Vanderbilt's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So I do think there is an argument between those two things.
Yeah, there is.
So it's just a shame that, and this is also goes to something else that I've been saying is people said that you would give the little guys access, and well, I would say Vanderbilt epitomizes the little guy more than almost anyone else in college football, and they're the one being screwed over. And the big boys, like Miami and Alabama and stuff, are going to make the college football playoff, and they're probably going to make a deep run. And my Alabama wouldn't shock anybody if they won it all. Whereas in almost any other year, they wouldn't have that chance. But that's the system you all wanted, so that's the system we're going to get.
Well, I, in one, would not be shocked if Alabama lost to Auburn.
Well, I wouldn't. They're only 5.5-point favorites.
Yeah.
It wouldn't shock me, but the fact that this Alabama team that has not been looked as nearly as good as previous year's Alabama team, a team that has no business being in any other college football playoff except this year's, the team that struggled against South Carolina, a team that has looked pretty poor at times throughout the season, is going to be clearly in, maybe the number 2 team in the country based on the way it's looking right now. I mean, it's a system we created. It's a system we got. So, hey, I'm not going to complain about it, but I'll look forward to it when it expands to 16 or 24 in about a month.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
Maybe we should go to 32 or 64 as well.
Can you imagine us weeding through trying to look at like 35 teams vying for 24 spots with 3 weeks left in the season?
Yeah, I know.
Gracious.
We would have arguments about Wake Forest being screwed because they're 8-3 and they're not even ranked, but SMU's ranked. But Wake Forest beat SMU. We would have those type of conversations.
Yeah, we're looking at 16 or 17 for 12. And again, I agree with your point that I think most seasons we're going to be arguing more teams. There is going to be more chaos and more teams stacked up. There are teams stacked up record-wise, but it's easy to eliminate them. I think it's going to be more convoluted in the future. And yeah, if you get to 24, then, oh my goodness, we're going to be looking at 40 teams.
Yeah, I know. I'm worried, Mark.
Maybe not on the last weekend of the season, but with like 2 to 3 weeks left.
Yeah. I'm worried because they pushed the playoff expansion from December 1st to like January 20th or something like that.
Yeah.
Just after the national championship game. Bro, with what the sport's done, it wouldn't surprise me if we went to 24 or 32 because, you know, Tulane, Arizona State need a chance. I mean, I'd argue they had their chance during the regular season, but what do I know? Anyway,
Yeah.
Mark, I look forward to this week when Ohio State wins an ugly 7-3, 10-6 type
Whoa.
football game.
Okay. Thanks to Real. And I was on Michigan podcast with Steve Deace this afternoon. He asked for a score, so I gave it to him. So you can check that out. But speaking of the weather, man, I tell you, I don't know what they do with the weather up there in Michigan. Steve explained it as every Michigan fan in existence up there gets all the kids and everybody with the aerosol cans to spray through that that ozone layer or something, because how many times has this happened where it's mid 50s during the week and on Saturday 30 for a high? So at noon, 1 o'clock in the 27, 28 degrees outside in Ann Arbor. And that's when Michigan wants. And that's football weather. So that's the way it is. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just obviously a bit of an advantage for the maize and blue. Okay. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And DeReal gave me a decent idea for a video, and now it's escaping me. There was a video in there somewhere. But anyway, if it pops back into my head, maybe I'll attack it. We'll be back here throughout the day on Wednesday. We've got 11 a.m. Eastern time with the Ohio State show. We've got Miami at 7. We've got Florida State at 8. And then we'll take your calls and your questions and everything at 10 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday night, right here at the Voice of College Football. And enjoy those rankings, and we'll see you soon.